Are you the kind of person that likes to, blend in, follow the crowd? Well, if you are, you may want to look away now, because what I'm about to show you are 4 of the most counterculture cars on sale today. Station wagons. That's right, station wagons. SUVs may be the far more popular choice for families these days, but we've assembled 4 of the most practical, stylish, and dare I say, sporty family cars on offer. Our quartet is led by the newly updated Mazda 6, now featuring a turbocharged engine under the bonnet. It's up against the new Holden Commodore, the Ford Mondeo, and as a wildcard, the sporty Skoda Octavia RS 245. And as usual, we'll be comparing the group on value, practicality, presentation, and dynamics. So let's find out which is the pick of the crop. So let's start with value, specifically pricing. We've got the Ford Mondeo Titanium, which is the most expensive here at just under $50,000. Next up, it's the Skoda Octavia RS 245, which is, like the Titanium, the top of the range model. So it starts at just over $47,000. Mazda 6 GT. Now that's not the top of the range, so it's priced from just over $45,000. Now finally, Holden Commodore RS Sportwagon, which at just over $39,000 is the most affordable of these 4. Now you're probably thinking, that's a pretty diverse group of cars you've assembled in regards to price, and you'd be right. And that's simply because in the overwhelming popularity and diversity of SUVs, the wagon market has become smaller and more specific. But simply looking at what you get for what you pay, the Mazda 6 is the pick here. It isn't perfect, notably missing Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it has a full suite of active safety gear, plus a bunch of creature comforts. Next up, let's look at practicality and presentation. Let's start with the Mazda, and there's a simple elegance to the new 6. A smart design and good quality materials coupled with comfortable seats and good space make it feel like the most premium offering in our group. In contrast, the new Commodore lives up to its position at the bottom of the price range. Lots of dark, hard plastics makes it look and feel more like a big Astra rather than a more premium family car. But on the plus side, it is generous on space for passengers both front and rear. The Ford may be the most expensive, but it feels a little cheap in places thanks to some basic material and a relatively simple layout. But the Mondeo is the oldest of these 4 here, having first launched overseas in 2014. So it's simply showing its age against newer, more polished competition. And while it stacks up well on space, particularly legroom in the rear, the standard panoramic glass roof does eat into headroom for taller, more adult passengers in the back seats. The Skoda is the outsider in this contest because it's arguably half a size smaller than its competition. It's still got good room though, enough in the front and the back, but it is slightly narrower across the back seat, so you will notice that if you try to carry a 5th passenger. As for the presentation, it's very impressive in places like the 9.2-inch high-res infotainment screen. There are some cheaper materials used that reveal the Octavia's more humble origins. Now of course, the biggest question of practicality with these wagons is the boot. So let's take a look at how they stack up against each other. We'll start with the Skoda, which as you can see, it's a decent size for what is ultimately a relatively compact wagon. It's got a lot of these clever touches that Skoda's renowned for. You've got shopping hooks that stick out if you want to, chuck your bags on there so they don't rattle around in the boot. You've got an inbuilt torch so you can see at night, and there's these little levers here that can drop the rear seats. It does have a slightly stepped down floor though, so it does buy you a little bit of width, but can make loading things in just that little bit trickier. Moving over to the Mazda 6. In terms of floor space, it's actually probably the same as the Skoda. There's only maybe a centimetre or 2 in it. It does have a more even floor height though, so you are losing a little bit of that depth. It also has the same drop down for the rear seats and some shopping bag hooks, much like the Skoda. What has that's really different, it stands out, is this sunblind that's built into the tailgate, so you've always got your stuff in the back nicely covered up and secure. Now, the Commodore. As you can probably see, the bag fits in with a bit more space around the edges. It's probably because it's a little bit wider, but it's got more depth to it. It's a longer boot, so you can squeeze a little bit more stuff inside. What it doesn't have though are some of those other clever touches. It doesn't have a lever back here to drop the rear seats. You're going to have to go around and do that yourself, but it does have some hooks sort of built into the side, so you are getting some of that practicality. And finally, the Mondeo. Now for starters, it's got a noticeably lower load height, so it's easier than the other three to get stuff into in the first place. But it's also definitely the widest of these four, and it's also probably similar in terms of depth to the Commodore. So overall, it's got the most space. But not only that, if I pull the bag out of the way, you can see back here, it's got this clever system that you can move around the cabin. You've got tow hooks here that'll actually slide up and down, and you can move the bar around and go on the diagonal to keep your load nice and secure, which is a big plus if you're going to chuck a lot of stuff in the back, so you know that it's going to be nice and secure. So all in all, it's a fairly safe bet to say the Mondeo is the most practical of these four. Finally, let's look at how these cars stack up on the road dynamically. The biggest change for the new Mazda 6 is the engine. The old naturally aspirated 2.5 litre 4-cylinder has been replaced by the turbocharged petrol version from the CX-9 SUV. It produces 170 kilowatts of power and 420 Nm of torque, which is the most pulling power in this contest. But its claimed fuel use of 7.6 litres per 100 Ks also makes it the thirstiest. It's mated to a 6-speed automatic transmission that drives the front wheels. Two things stand out about the new 6. The first is obviously the engine. Really, Mazdas are synonymous for having, rather free revving engines, but with this you just don't have to really work it that hard. You can just put your foot down and it's got that bottom end torque that turbo motors are synonymous with. The other thing that sticks out is how quiet it is. Mazdas have unfortunately earned a deserved reputation for being quite noisy, but in recent years they seem to have turned a corner. Models like the CX-9 are a lot quieter. You get a lot less road noise and wind noise in the cabin, and they've applied those techniques to this new 6, and it's definitely a much more serene place to be than previous 6, that's for sure. The Commodore RS is the most powerful of this group, boasting 191 kilowatts and 350 newton meters from its 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine. Despite the extra grunt, it manages to use slightly less fuel than the Mazda at a claimed 7.4 litres per 100 Ks. It also drives the front wheels, but through a 9-speed automatic transmission. On the road, the engine does a good job. It doesn't sound that flash when you accelerate. It sounds a little, wheezy almost, but it doesn't feel wheezy. It's actually got, quite good pickup, and it feels quite strong when it really gets going. And in terms of how it handles, well, it's pretty good. It's got direct steering. It feels quite agile and responsive for, a decent-sized wagon. But the problem with this new Commodore is not that it does anything particularly badly, it's that it doesn't do anything particularly well. It doesn't stand out from the pack, so to speak. It just feels a little bit, dare I say, middle of the road. Ford has opted for a diesel-heavy lineup for the Mondeo Wagon range. So it's powered by a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel, good for 132 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. That means while it still has plenty of torque, it's also the most fuel-efficient of these four, using a claimed 5.1 litres per 100 k's. It is paired to Ford's controversial PowerShift 6-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission, and like the others, it drives the front wheels. Now, obviously, the diesel engine makes the Mondeo a very different proposition than the other three wagons we're testing here. But, judged on its merits, it's a good engine. You put your foot down, and it's got plenty of torque, so it builds that speed really easily. The other thing that's interesting about the Mondeo is it is the oldest of these four by a few years, but I'm going to say it doesn't feel its age. It actually still holds up very well. The ride and handling is actually really well sorted, and it's a nice wagon to drive. Certainly, it's more than capable of holding its own against its competitors here. The Skoda is powered by the same 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo petrol engine you'd find in a Volkswagen Golf GTI. In the Octavia RS 245, it's tuned to produce 180 kilowatts and 370 newton meters. It sends the power to the front wheels via a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. At a claimed 6.5 litres per 100 kilometres, it's the most fuel-efficient petrol model we're testing. It may not have the most power or the most torque, but the Octavia is definitely the sportiest. It feels the most enjoyable to drive. It's agile, it's responsive, and really it feels like what it is, and that's slightly smaller than the other wagons here. This is really the car that if you're graduating up into a family car, for example, you've been in hatchbacks and you need something to do the school run in, but you still want to find the odd twisty road on the weekend, or dare I say, do a track day. this is the wagon you can do it in. So there you have it, proof that you don't need to rush out and join the SUV crowd if you're looking for a practical family car. Which one of these four is best though? That's a difficult question to answer. The Holden is the most affordable, has a spacious interior and a punchy engine, but it also looks and feels the cheapest inside, so its value argument lets it down. The Ford offers excellent practicality and a frugal diesel engine, but at its asking price, it needs a better presented cabin. The Skoda put up a great fight, and with its blend of practicality and sportiness, it will appeal to families that still enjoy a weekend blast down a twisty road. Which leaves the Mazda 6 GT as our pick of this counterculture quartet. But the Mazda offers a more comfortable, polished and refined driving experience that will appeal to the type of driver that doesn't mind standing out.